Welcome to Teachings and Tangents with Kathy Batista. Here we are again. Today, I want to talk to you guys about problems again, right? So, episode 7 is about why you aren't solving your problems. How come they're not solved yet, right? And then I want to touch on that episode 4 is about compassion. And we touch a little bit on self compassion inside of that episode. But so those are 2 reference episodes for today's episode, which is sort of like an elaboration on those 2 combined. Anyway, so for today, the topic around issues and problems, and when we come up with when we feel angry about someone or something, you'll often hear me talk about people, places, and things, right? Like all of those little things, right? Like we might think of going back to this restaurant where we had a horrible experience, right? So then we've got this place that causes us issues and people, right? Whatever happened there. I mean, maybe it didn't even involve directly people, maybe you just didn't like your food or whatever, but we tend to hold on to these things, people, places, and things. And we tend actually to hold on to the undesired, the negative, the unwanted things that happen. And this is because our brain is set up for a negative bias, which actually its intention is to keep us safe. But an output or an effect of that would be that it keeps us small and it keeps us playing small, because that does feel safer, right? It feels safer to just avoid and remember all those things that caused you pain or that you didn't like instead of working through, right? We can never really go around it, or like that nursery rhyme, right? Above it, below it. I can't remember. It's about bears, I think, in the woods or something. Oh, they're going on a bear hunt. Anyway, so we tend to hold on to that and not go through things, knowing we try to go above them, around them, because these negative biases, the things we remember, the things that it's our interpretation of an event, right? We have this higher level subconscious view of an event, and then we have this conscious view of an event, and we live in our conscious world. And avoiding the things that affect us in a way that we don't want, in a negative way, really, only serves to limit you in your life. And then when you're limited and you don't feel expressed, now you're unhappy. You're safe, but you're unhappy, right? So what we want to do is realize that we can take a look at things that make us uncomfortable, things that make us unhappy, things we don't want, all of that. We can look at that and really break it down further. And that was in episode 7. We talked about how most of our problems that aren't solved, we just haven't reverse engineered it all the way back to that it's fear. That fear that you're missing out on something, fear that you're losing something, fear that something will be taken away, fear you'll never get something, right? And I was thinking more about that episode after I recorded it, and when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, we ultimately want to feel loved and accepted. So underneath that of what are we missing out on? What's being taken away? What the whole FOMO thing, right? Once we work through that, and that's what I mean by reverse engineering, because it takes a lot to just be like, oh, I'm mad at you because I feel unloved. And that's the bottom line, right? We need to get and work through these levels and rectify and actually come to terms with what's going on through each of our levels of emotions, right? You can even consider it each of our energetic bodies. Something happens, and we need to work through those 4 energetic bodies to get to this spiritual whole body. When we find out, that's where we can start to build from the ground up. And I think it takes a very special and seasoned and I don't know, somebody who has been at this a very long time or has a connection that I haven't met anybody that does. I'm sure there are people, and some teachers are in that way that they can jump straight from a problem into realizing that it's at that base level of fear, and underneath that fear is a desire to be loved and accepted. And so when you work with somebody to get through to those points, you do get through to those different levels of anger and fear. And you know how they say there's those levels of acceptance when you're grieving, right? So it's anything like that, you need to work through it, and it's worth it. Like, it's not always fun and it's not always great, but it's totally worth it. But what I wanted to share in that, we have people who are listening who are really right on that cusp, and all they need to know is a way to get to that final stage and a way to foster that answer. And then others, we want to work more diligently. And it is truly dependent on the problem sometimes, where we're at, how we can process it. So we talked about in episode 7, it being fear as the ground level, like get to that fear. What is it that you're afraid of missing out on? What is it that you're afraid of losing? And you come up with an answer. It might be, this affects my reputation, or this affects my ability to be taken seriously, or, whatever the problem is, this means people are judging me or I'm judging myself. But ultimately, underneath that fear is this universal need by every single human. Your motivating factor is to be loved and to be accepted. And there are people who are like, I don't care. I don't care what people say. I don't care what people think. That's fine. You can say that. I'll challenge you because I think you might. But it's in that realizing that we have this desire to be loved, to be accepted, that we can begin to heal, and to take it one step further. And this is, so side note, tangent coming. This is one of the reasons why I've always hesitated to do a YouTube or a podcast, is because conviction. I'm not afraid to say what I believe, but I'm afraid that I'm going to upset somebody else. So I'm going to throw that blanket statement out there that my intention is not to upset anybody else. But we get to this point where we've moved through all the levels, we move through fear, and we're there, and we realize the next level is your desire to be loved, and loved fully, like unconditional love, right? And it's when we realize that we are already with the universe, the divine, God, that we are part of the whole. And in that we come from the whole means we are whole to begin with. And so fostering a relationship with your God, with your divine, with your universe, source, love, highest self. So many words describe what that is, right? It's just the oneness, the unity of the world, right? So when you can embrace that, yes, love from humans is wonderful. Love from animals is pretty good too. But that you're already divinely loved every moment of every day. The second you got onto this earth, and before that, you are solely adored and loved because you are part of the divine, because your God made you, because you are part of the universe. So it's a hard thing, and it doesn't always make you feel better, right? But to get to that point where you know you're never alone because you are always part of the whole, and you are fully loved by your God, is now the deeper level to that. And so that's where episode 4 and episode 4 on compassion and episode 7 on why your problems aren't solved yet, this is kind of a continuation of both of those because it gives us the insight and it allows me to share what I've learned. And just because I've learned it doesn't mean like I'm wicked good at it or anything. And I definitely every problem I have of are all of my own making, and I have to go through every stage to get to that final one of acceptance. And sometimes I never get there with problems. I have a number of problems that are left unattended to because they hurt too much, or it doesn't feel good, or it's I'm human, right? But knowing that you can drive down to that and practice with the little problems, right? Like think about if you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, you get mad and angry sometimes, right? And if we can narrow that down, that it was fear, you were being, pushed out of your space and time going forward, right? Or you could have gotten hurt, all these fears, when ultimately it is love. Why would someone do that if there's no love, right? Why? Like, so it's getting to those points. And that's where you work with a coach or a therapist or a counselor and a mentor. Even, I mean, honestly, I bet like ministers or priests, I don't my religion isn't in an institution, so I'm not sure. And I'm sure that I hear about people going to counseling and therapy with their ministers or their priests or their bishops, or I don't even know what. Anyway, talk to somebody because that's where we get that also sense of not being alone and sharing that. So, in this episode, I will leave you with the suggestion to go back and watch 7 and 4 and then see how we can tie these all in together and work through the levels. And now if you're in the membership program that goes along with these teachings, we dive deep into figuring this out together, and we actually spend the month on these too. And at any point you join the membership, you have access to the whole library. So even if this was recorded and aired months ago, you can still access these teachings. And then because you're in the membership, you can always reach out to me directly and we can work through some of these things together. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you rewatch 4 and 7 and connect it to this episode. And my desire for you is that you see your wholeness and that no matter where you are, you are adored and loved by your highest power and the highest good for you. Until next time. Whoops. There we go. Until next time. Not yet.